Listening closely to Hunky Dory, we realized that Bowie was undergoing a serious crisis. From his previous albums, we already learned that he felt that life could be more than the mundane existence in modern society, and was trying all sorts of doctrines that were supposed to take him higher, but none of them really satisfied him. Now, in Life on Mars, he tells us that he has run out of options, and every way of life out there looks the same to him. And Quicksand shows that this realization leaves him stuck, not knowing how to act, and feeling like he is slowly sinking into oblivion. He must find something to cling to, something solid that he can use to pull himself out of the quicksand. But where can he find it? Well, if the outside world failed to provide solutions, there is one more option he can try. Ever since Descartes, Western thinkers who felt skeptical about existing dogmas turned to self-reflection, to find out what it is about their own existence that they can be certain of, and use as a building block for a new system of thought. The self is going through changes, but, most people believe, beneath all these changes there is also a core that remains constant, a soul, a real self, that is the essence of who you are. So if you can find that real self, and form a way of life based on it, you will live an authentic and happy life. If all else failed, maybe this type of existentialist self-reflection can show Bowie the way.
Still don't know what I was waiting for, and my time was running wild, a million dead-end streets, and every time I thought I'd got it made, it seemed the taste was not so sweet.
Bowie begins by telling us that he was waiting for something, but he doesn't know what. He felt that life should be different, but didn't know how. This made him feel alienated to the life he was leading, and when you are alienated, you feel like the things that you do are not connected to one another, and form no coherent whole. You don't know what future you want to be heading towards, and the result is that you have no control over time. It is running wild in all directions. To regain control over your time, you must have a worldview that tells you where you're coming from and where you're going to. But Bowie tells us that every worldview he tried has led him to a dead end, and left him dissatisfied. Therefore, he turned to self-reflection, to find his real self and create a new worldview based on it. However,
So I turned myself to face me, but I've never caught a glimpse how the others must see the faker. I'm much too fast to take that test.
turning to look at himself, Bowie found that there is no such thing as a real self, a core that remains constant through all the changes. Everything about him is subject to change, and these changes happen so fast that the attempt to use self-reflection to find your real self is akin to trying to turn around to face yourself. In other words, an absurd notion. He acknowledges that other people believe that they can identify the real self, but deems what they see as a faker. The search for the real self, then, is yet another dead end. The only constant thing he can find about himself is the fact that he is constantly changing. And this, of course, is also the answer. If the only thing he can be sure of is that he will keep on changing, then the change is his fundamental truth, the certainty he can use as a building block to create a new worldview. Self-reflection revealed no real self, but it did reveal the essence of human existence. And that essence is...
Changes. Turn and face the strain. Changes. Don't wanna be a richer man. Changes. Turn and face the strain. Changes. It's gonna have to be a different man. Time may change me, but I can't trace time.
Bowie tried to turn myself to face me, to find the constant me beneath all the changes, but discovered that there was no constant me to be faced. So instead, he turns to face the changes and find out what are the rules that govern them. Western culture teaches us that we should work for a better future, where we would be richer and happier. But Bowie rejects this perception of happiness and adopts a perception of pop culture. Happiness, in the worldview of pop culture, is not something that will come in the future, but something that can be ours in the here and now. What Bowie adds to this worldview is the insight that happiness in the here and now comes from changing oneself. His answer to the problem of not being able to control time is to accept it as a given. Indeed, he cannot trace time, cannot determine the future he should be headed to, so there's no point in trying. But what he can do is focus on the present and try to figure out the kind of change that will make him happy in the here and now.
I watch the ripples change their size, but never leave the stream of warm and permanent sand. So the days float through my eyes, but still the days seem the same.
Bowie equates existence to a stream, ever-flowing and ever-changing. He is certainly not the first to use this metaphor, and he probably got it from Buddhism, although it exists in Western thought as well. Many philosophies and doctrines have pretended to take us out of the stream, and present a truth that is eternal and stable, but Bowie deems them nothing but ripples in the stream. Some of those ripples may be bigger and last longer than others, but eventually they will all be washed away back into the stream of impermanence. And yet, the days seem the same, as if nothing new ever happens. How come? How is it that even though everything is ever changing, everything still seems the same? Because Western thought conditioned us to think that only one type of change is a real change, and that's the type of change that will take us out of the stream. Almost all of Western thought, and Eastern thought for that matter, preaches that man cannot find happiness in the ever-changing reality, and should therefore aspire to transcend it, to become part of something that is eternal. Therefore, the changes that happen within the stream are seen as meaningless. But Bowie overturns this picture. The stream of impermanence isn't all bad and miserable. It is rather warm and habitable. Happiness should be sought within the stream.
And these children that you spit on as they try to change their worlds are immune to your consultations. They're quite aware of what they're going through. Changes. Turn and face the strange. Changes. Don't tell them to grow up out of it. Changes. Turn and face the strange. Changes. Where's the shame you've left us up to our next event? Time may change me, but you can't twist time.
Once again, Bowie does what he does in several other records from that period, pretending to be the spokesperson for his generation, while actually presenting his own unique worldview. He speaks to the older generations, who believe that they know where humanity is heading towards. Remember, back then, the belief in modern progress still reigned supreme. So the older generations think that the only meaningful changes are those that take the world towards the desired goal of creating the perfect society. When they talk about changing the world, they mean changing society to make it compatible with some eternal ideal, and they dismiss the kind of changes that the youth are going through, and tell them to grow out of it. Bowie's reply is that it is actually the adults who are clueless, because they delude themselves that they can trace time, and because they don't realize that the youth simply have a different perception of what it means to change the world. In this new perception, the emphasis is not on the world, but on the change. In other words, the happiness that comes from changing the world does not come from the fact that the world is changed, but from the joy you feel while changing it. Actually, Bowie no longer speaks of the world, but of worlds. Every one of us has his own private world, and everyone's world is different. But when one changes their private world, the type of change that they make can actually be emulated by others, to change their world as well. Bowie pretends to be speaking for the youth, and that the view he expresses here is what stands at the basis of the counterculture's rebellion. But actually, he is radically redefining its maxims. In 1963, Bob Dylan sang, "Come mothers and fathers throughout the land, and don't criticize what you don't understand. Your sons and daughters are beyond your command. Your old world is rapidly aging. Please get out of the new one if you can't lend your hand, for the times they are a-changin'." And it is rather these words that were what the counterculture was about. Dylan, here, still believes that he can trace time, that he knows where the changes are taking us, and that the difference between the generations is that the young generation is the one going in the right direction. Bowie's words are reminiscent of Dylan's, but his concept of change is fundamentally different. Dylan's song still belongs to the old way of thinking, the thinking that believes that we should swim to solid land, and that the changes we make should be aimed in that direction, or we will sink like a stone. For Bowie, it is exactly this way of thinking that has left us up to our necks in it. Instead, we should keep on swimming in the stream of warm impermanence, and focus on the nature of the changes, find out which ones produce joy.
Strange fascination fascinating me. Our changes are taking the pace I'm going through.
His ever-shifting existence, then, will not derive its meaning from its direction, but from its rhythm. The changes set the pace for this rhythm, and his mission is to make it groovy and joyful. The question then becomes, what kind of changes are changes that induce joy? Bowie already gives us part of the answer. Joyful changes come from being taken over by a strange fascination, a fascination to something that is alien to your current identity. While most people fear the strange, and would rather hang on to the familiar, Bowie decrees that you should turn and face the strange. Let it take over you and change you.
Changes. Turn and face the strange. Changes. Ooh, look out, you rock and rollers. Changes. Turn and face the strange. Changes. Pretty soon now you're gonna get older. Time may change me, but I can't trace time. I said that time may change me, but I can't trace time.
The final chorus reminds us of The Who's My Generation, with the famous assertion, "I hope I die before I get old," which actually meant, I'd rather die than become an adult. What is so bad about getting old? What is so bad about becoming an adult? Bowie's reply would be, being an adult means that you can no longer change yourself, that you are stuck in one identity. So before time changes him and turns him into an adult, he is going to try to change himself into someone who masters his own changes. If he succeeds in that, then maybe, just maybe, he can avoid becoming an adult and remain young forever. The performance says it even louder than the words. The verses are like a slow meandering through the banality of everyday life, but then comes the fluttering of the excitement of changing, and everything accelerates and becomes more dynamic and fun, until it falls back into sluggish routine, only to be revitalized by another change. The music shifts tempo and keys, but Bowie stays on top of it, proving to be up to all the changes, and singing with the confidence and verve of a man who has regained control over his life. Bowie found the key to happiness, the way to pull himself out of the quicksand and up to Mars. From here on, he is not going to look for others to give him the answers. When he will emulate the work of others, it will be to create something of his own, something that is alien to his current identity, something that can change him and take him out of his world. Changes is more than a song. It is a philosophical dissertation and a mission statement. It is the creed that Bowie will live by from here on.